Galactic Council mocked as human inherits the king's rejected daughter. The galaxy was vast, infinite in its mysteries, and deadly in its politics. Across the stars, countless species thrived, each claiming its own place in the hierarchy of power. At the center of this complex web was the Galactic Council, a gathering of the most advanced civilizations, whose decisions shaped the lives of millions. Their halls shimmered with alien architecture, and their members, creatures of intelligence, skill, and technology far beyond human comprehension, looked down on any species that did not meet their standards. And then there were humans. Humans, according to the Council, were weak. Fragile, slow, unimpressive. Among all the species in the galaxy, they were considered almost irrelevant, a footnote in a book too long to be remembered. Captain Eric Kane knew this better than anyone. Eric had been born on Earth, but most of his life had been spent traveling the outer sectors, far from the hub of galactic politics. He had a small ship, a quiet station on the edge of known space, and a simple code he lived by. Survive, learn, and never underestimate anyone, not even the supposedly perfect aliens. Yet, for all his skills, Eric was mocked. The Council had seen him once in a minor inspection and had laughed. A human captain leading ships, preposterous, they had said. Even now, messages from distant sectors contained subtle jabs at his species. Eric was used to it. He had learned early in life that humans were underestimated, and underestimated humans could surprise even the most arrogant alien minds. That was about to happen. It began on an ordinary day. Eric was tinkering with the engine of his small transport vessel when a transmission flickered on his terminal. Its seal was unlike any he had seen before, royal, elegant, and unmistakably Azurathian. Curious, he opened the message. Captain Eric Kane, the message began, by decree of the late King Thalorian of Azurath, you are hereby entrusted with the care of Princess Leora, the daughter I once rejected. Your guardianship is to commence immediately. Eric blinked. He read it twice, then thrice. The message continued, formal and precise, outlining Leora's skills, her status as the king's rejected child, and a list of protections that were to accompany her. But what caught Eric's attention was the underlying implication. The king had chosen a human, a species considered weak by the galaxy, to care for someone of royal blood. He chuckled softly. Well, that's unexpected. Unexpected was an understatement. The Galactic Council would have a field day with this. They had already mocked him repeatedly for being human, and now a king, long respected for wisdom and judgment, had left him in charge of his daughter. Eric's curiosity grew. Who was this Princess Leora? Why had the king rejected her? And why trust a human, especially one so lightly regarded with such a responsibility? Answers, he realized, lay ahead, and whatever they were, he had no choice but to accept. The journey to Azurath was long. Eric's ship glided through fields of starlight, past asteroid belts and distant planets glowing faintly in the darkness. During the trip, he reviewed the records the king had sent. Leora was 15, trained in both combat and diplomacy, and had been isolated from public life because of political complications in the royal court. She was clever, independent, and perhaps dangerous if underestimated. Eric smiled faintly. Sounds like she's not going to need babysitting, more like someone to keep up with her. The further he traveled, the more he felt the weight of the task. He was no ordinary human, perhaps, but the galaxy's perception of him mattered. Every alien who heard he was the Guardian would doubt him. Every step he took would be scrutinized, and any mistake could be disastrous. But that was okay. Humans thrived under pressure. On Azurath, the capital city was a marvel. Towers of shimmering crystal rose into the sky, connected by bridges of light and floating platforms. The streets were filled with aliens of every shape and color, all moving with purpose. Flying vehicles zipped above, leaving trails of neon light in their wake. Eric landed on a quiet platform near the palace gates. Guards of the royal court, tall and imposing beings with golden armor, approached, their eyes wary. "Captain Kane?" one asked, voice deep and resonant. "Yes, Eric Kane," he replied, stepping forward. "You are here for Princess Leora?" the guard asked. His tone was polite, but there was an unmistakable edge, suspicion. "She is particular, few can handle her temperament." Eric nodded. "I'm ready for particular." The guards exchanged looks, then opened the gates. Inside, the palace was even more breathtaking. Walls of polished crystal reflected the light from floating orbs, and delicate gardens filled the halls with the scent of alien flowers. At the center, a young woman stood waiting, Princess Leora. She was taller than most humans, with piercing eyes the color of emeralds. Her hair shimmered like silver threads, and her movements were precise and confident. She looked at Eric, and he immediately noticed the challenge in her gaze. "You are human," she said, voice calm but sharp. "I was expecting someone more competent." Eric suppressed a grin. "I hear that a lot." Leora's lips twitched in what might have been amusement or contempt. "You have no idea what you're getting yourself into." "I don't need a guardian, and I certainly don't need a human interfering in my life." Eric held her gaze steadily. "I don't intend to interfere. I intend to survive, and if necessary, help." The tension between them was immediate, almost tangible. Leora studied him carefully, as if trying to measure his strength. Eric, in return, noted her intelligence, her skill, and the quiet force in her movements. This was no ordinary princess. She was a challenge, and humans thrived on challenges. Over the next few days, Eric tried to learn more about Leora and her life. The palace staff treated him with thinly veiled skepticism. Aliens whispered, exchanged looks, and some even laughed behind his back. The council would have found this hilarious. Another human, this time in charge of royal blood, surely doomed to fail. Yet Eric persisted. He spent time observing Leora, noting her routines, her training, and her habits. Slowly, he began to understand why she had been rejected. The king feared her strength, her defiance, and her refusal to conform to political expectations. He realized that his task was not simply to guard her, it was to earn her trust. That he knew would be far more difficult than any battle. The first test came sooner than expected. One night, a security alert sounded in the palace. Shadows moved unnaturally fast, and a breach had occurred in one of the outer gardens. Leora sprang into action, her combat training evident in every precise movement. Eric followed, keeping close but cautious. A group of masked intruders tried to take Leora by surprise, assuming the human was incapable of defending her. They underestimated him. Using the terrain, his knowledge of human improvisation, and quick thinking, Eric managed to block their path, confuse them, and buy enough time for Leora to neutralize the threat. After the danger passed, Leora looked at him with new respect. "You didn't fail," she said, her voice softer now, tinged with surprise. Eric shrugged. "Humans are often underestimated. That's usually a mistake." It was a small victory, but a significant one. The first impression of failure, the one the council expected, had not come to pass. For the first time, Leora saw that perhaps her guardian was not just a human joke, but someone capable and intelligent. As dawn approached, Eric stood by the palace balcony, looking at the vast expanse of stars. He thought of the council's mocking voices, the whispers of doubt, and the challenges that lay ahead. Yet, despite everything, he felt a strange sense of purpose. The galaxy did not expect humans to succeed. That gave him an advantage. And somewhere in the corridors of the palace, Princess Leora began to reconsider what it meant to have a human by her side. Perhaps, she thought, strength could take many forms, not just power, wealth, or advanced technology, but courage, intelligence, and an unyielding spirit. The first step of a long journey had begun, and though neither Eric nor Leora knew it yet, the galaxy itself was about to witness what humans were truly capable of. The Palace of Azurath was magnificent, yet it was also a place of shadows. Glittering halls hid secrets. Elegant gardens concealed dangers. Every corner seemed to hold whispers of the past, of politics, and of ambitions long buried. For Eric Kane, the human guardian, every step into this world was a lesson in patience, observation, and humility. He had survived in the outer sectors for years, but this environment, one dominated by beings far more advanced than humans, was different. Here, appearances could deceive, power could shift in an instant, and the wrong word could ignite wars. And then there was Princess Leora. She was unlike anyone Eric had ever met. Independent, strong-willed, and intelligent, she carried herself with confidence that was both mesmerizing and intimidating. Her emerald eyes, so sharp and calculating, seemed to see past the surface of everything. And she had no intention of letting a human, even one assigned by her late father, interfere in her life. "Captain Kane," she said one morning, her voice smooth and controlled, "I understand that the council believes humans are weak. Do you?" Eric, standing in the garden courtyard, smiled faintly. The morning sunlight caught his hair, but he ignored the impression he might be making. "I've heard that from some very confident aliens." Leora narrowed her eyes. "And you agree with them?" "Not at all," he replied. I think humans are often underestimated. That's usually a mistake. She let a small, almost imperceptible smile cross her lips. It was the first sign of warmth or amusement Eric had seen from her, but it was fleeting. Life in the palace was a challenge. Every meal, every interaction, every walk through the corridors reminded Eric of the cultural differences he had to navigate. Palace staff treated him with suspicion. Royal advisors whispered about his presence behind closed doors. And the council, should they learn of his role, would mock him without mercy. Yet, despite the obstacles, Eric approached every challenge with quiet determination. He observed Leora, learning her habits, noticing how she reacted under pressure, and slowly, carefully, figuring out how to earn her trust. Trust, he realized, would be earned not through words alone, but through action. The first real test came sooner than expected. It was the night of the Crystal Festival, a celebration of Azurath's culture and history. Streets were illuminated with floating lights, and the air was filled with music that carried across the city. Aliens of every shape and size walked together, enjoying the festivities. But trouble was never far in the palace or the city. A sudden alarm pierced the evening air. Security forces rushed toward the royal grounds. Intruders had been spotted moving through the lower gardens. Leora's eyes narrowed. "This is no accident," she said. "Someone wants to test us or me." Eric didn't hesitate. "Then we'll make sure they fail." They moved quickly through hidden corridors, avoiding the crowds until they reached the garden walls. The intruders were advanced operatives, skilled in stealth and combat. But they underestimated the human. Eric had no special training from the council, no alien technology that could overwhelm them, yet he had something rare in the galaxy: human creativity under pressure. Using shadows, pathways, and the environment, he blocked entrances, misled attackers, and coordinated with Leora, who was a formidable fighter in her own right. The battle was swift. Leora struck with precision, Eric adapted and improvised, and together they neutralized the threat before any major harm occurred. Afterward, Leora looked at him, eyes wide with a mix of surprise and respect. "You handled that very well," she said quietly. Eric shrugged. "Humans often get overlooked. That makes us dangerous." For the first time, she seemed to pause, reconsidering her preconceptions about this human assigned to her care. The next days were filled with careful observation, training, and preparation. Leora had skills that even Eric admired. She could move faster than most, analyze situations with razor-sharp intelligence, and anticipate outcomes before they happened. Yet she had gaps too, moments where her instincts alone could not solve problems. Eric filled those gaps with ingenuity. He taught her small strategies that humans used in unexpected situations, improvising with available tools, observing behavior patterns, and leveraging unpredictability to gain an advantage. At first, Leora resisted. She had always relied on her own training, her royal status, and the superiority of her civilization. But gradually she began to see the value in Eric's methods, not because they were flashy or powerful, but because they worked. Meanwhile, Eric learned more about Leora's past. She had been rejected by her father not for lack of skill, but because he feared the political consequences of her strength and independence. Her mother had died when she was young, leaving Leora to grow under the scrutiny of advisors who often valued politics over truth. This knowledge deepened Eric's respect for her. Leora's struggles were not just about being royal, they were about surviving in a world that feared what she represented. And that meant that his role as her guardian was more than protection. It was mentorship, support, and trust building. He spent time teaching her how to see opportunities where others saw obstacles, how to remain calm under pressure, and most importantly, how to trust someone else without losing her independence. The council, far away, remained oblivious. They had dismissed the idea of a human guardian as absurd. They expected failure, embarrassment, or worse. But Eric's successes, though small, began to ripple outward. A few of the palace staff noticed his intelligence, Leora's growing respect, and the subtle way humans could adapt in ways aliens rarely did. It was a lesson the galaxy had yet to learn. Underestimating a species could be the gravest mistake one could make. The true test came unexpectedly. One afternoon, as Eric and Leora explored the outer palace grounds, a message arrived via encrypted channels, a warning of an approaching danger. Alien mercenaries, highly trained and equipped with advanced weapons, were moving toward Azurath, intent on capturing Leora for political leverage. The news did not shock Leora. She had anticipated danger, but even she did not expect the scale. Arik, however, remained calm. He understood the power of planning, improvisation, and trust. "We need a strategy," he said, "and we need one that no one expects." Leora studied him, eyes bright with determination. "I'm listening." Arik outlined a plan. It relied not on brute force, but on misdirection, understanding the enemy's psychology and exploiting gaps in their knowledge of the city. It was simple in concept, but required perfect timing, coordination, and courage. Over the next few hours, they prepared. Leora coordinated the palace defenses, while Arik set traps, observed enemy patterns, and created contingency plans. His human intuition, often dismissed as inferior by the council, proved invaluable. When the mercenaries arrived, expecting an easy capture, they were met with confusion, resistance, and unexpected tactics. Leora fought with precision, Arik guided movements, and together they turned the attackers' strength against them. By the time reinforcements arrived, the mercenaries were in retreat, unable to comprehend how two individuals, one a human, the other a royal, had outsmarted them. Afterward, Leora looked at Arik with admiration. "I underestimated you," she admitted. Arik smiled. "And I underestimated you at first too, but humans are good at learning, and so are some royals." It was a moment of mutual respect. A bond was forming, fragile but growing, built on trust, shared danger, and recognition of strength. That night, Arik stood on the balcony again, looking at the stars. He thought of the council's laughter, the mercenaries' surprise, and the challenges yet to come. Humans were underestimated, yes, but that made them unpredictable, adaptable, and dangerous in ways others could not imagine. Inside the palace, Leora watched him silently. She had always believed she had to rely only on herself. Now she realized that strength could come from unexpected places, and trust, carefully given, could be as powerful as skill. For the first time, the human she had mocked seemed not just capable, but indispensable. And somewhere, far beyond the stars, the Galactic Council continued its work, unaware that a human was quietly beginning to rewrite the rules of the galaxy. The days following the mercenary attack were tense but productive. Azurath's palace hummed with activity, yet the undercurrent of danger was never far. Guards patrolled more frequently, communications buzzed with warnings, and whispers of political intrigue spread through the halls. For Arik Kane, the human guardian, every new day was a lesson in vigilance. He had survived countless encounters in the outer sectors, but palace life was different. The threats were not always obvious, and enemies hid behind masks of diplomacy, smiles, and polite words. Princess Leora had grown more receptive to his presence. The night of the attack had shifted something in her. Her skepticism had not vanished, but respect had begun to replace it. She had begun to see that Arik's human methods, improvisation, keen observation, and quick decision-making were often more effective than the rigid protocols followed by alien species. Yet neither of them realized how deep the danger ran. It began with a private meeting. Leora summoned Arik to a quiet wing of the palace, one filled with records, ancient artifacts, and holographic displays of Azurath's history. "There is more to this than mercenaries," Leora said, her emerald eyes sharp with intensity. "I've been reviewing the king's files. Some factions within the council, powerful ones, had reasons to see me fail. They wanted my father to reject me entirely, to eliminate any threat I might pose to their plans. The attack was just the beginning." Arik studied the displays, his mind quickly analyzing the situation. So the mercenaries were hired by someone close, someone with access to intelligence and resources. "Yes," Leora agreed, "and they're still here, watching, waiting." The gravity of the situation was not lost on Arik. Humans were often underestimated, but so were plots that were slow, subtle, and carefully hidden. In this game, raw power alone would not save them. They needed strategy, cunning, and unpredictability. "You're not just a princess," Arik said quietly. "You're a target and a symbol. If they fail to control you, they'll fail entirely," Leora nodded. "And that is why I need you." The next few days were spent uncovering the layers of the conspiracy. Arik and Leora worked together, combing through communications, interrogating palace staff, and observing the patterns of those around them. What they discovered was shocking. Several influential council members had secretly allied with corrupt leaders on Azurath. Their plan was to destabilize the palace, discredit the royal family, and eventually place a puppet ruler in Leora's place. Humans think differently, Leora remarked one evening, watching Eric analyze the data. You see connections we overlook, patterns in things we consider random, Eric smiled. That's the advantage of being underestimated. You assume we can't understand your systems, but we can. We just do it differently. It was a subtle lesson in humility for Leora. She had grown up believing that advanced technology, strict training, and intelligence alone were the keys to success. But Eric showed her that perspective, adaptability, and intuition were equally powerful tools. The first test of their new understanding came swiftly. Intelligence reports indicated that a group of the conspirators planned to attack a palace supply convoy, intending to frame human forces for the disruption. Eric studied the map carefully. "They'll expect us to defend directly," he said. "That's the obvious move." "But the obvious is always where you lose." Leora raised an eyebrow. "So what do we do?" "Not what they expect. We'll set a trap, use the terrain, the convoy's own schedule, and their assumptions against them." Together, they crafted a plan. Leora used her authority to subtly reroute the convoy, while Eric created a series of ambush points, misdirections, and escape routes. The conspirators, confident in their knowledge of the palace's routines, were caught off guard. Their attack was thwarted before it could begin, and the blame fell on none of the human forces. For Leora, it was another revelation. "You don't fight like anyone else I've seen," she said afterward. "You think beyond the rules." Eric nodded. "Rules are useful, but only when you know why they exist. Otherwise, they're chains." It was a quiet victory, but one that demonstrated the strength of human ingenuity in a galaxy that had long dismissed it. Meanwhile, the Council remained oblivious. They believed humans could not influence events at this level. They mocked Eric from afar, convinced that he would fail to protect the princess or unravel the conspiracy. Their arrogance, however, blinded them to the truth. Humans were adaptive, creative, and resilient. Eric used this to his advantage. Every step he took, every move he made was unpredictable to the conspirators. Humans did not rely solely on advanced technology. They relied on understanding, improvisation, and the courage to act decisively when others hesitated. Leora, watching him, realized that she had underestimated not only him but the potential of her species. The very thing her father had feared, human unpredictability, was now a shield that kept them safe. As the palace tension rose, Eric and Leora grew closer, not romantically, but as partners, confidants, and strategists. They shared meals while discussing tactics, trained together in the palace's training halls, and studied the conspirators' networks late into the night. Trust, once a fragile concept, became a foundation for their actions. "Why do you care so much?" Leora asked one night, her voice soft, almost questioning. Eric looked at her thoughtfully. "Because I know what it feels like to be underestimated. And because I know what it feels like to fight for someone who matters. You matter, more than anyone knows." Leora did not respond immediately, but she absorbed his words. For a princess used to being controlled, rejected, and underestimated, the human sincerity was a revelation. The conspiracy, however, did not remain hidden. One night, a palace informant approached them quietly, providing critical information. The conspirators planned to strike during the upcoming council summit, using the event to seize control of Azurath openly. Leora and Eric understood the stakes. The summit would bring together leaders from across the galaxy. A successful attack would not only threaten the princess, but destabilize the region entirely. "This is bigger than anything we've faced," Leora said, her voice steady but tense. Eric nodded. "Then we make it bigger. We use every advantage we have, and we remind the galaxy that humans are not as weak as they think." Together, they began planning for the summit. The strategy involved careful observation, the use of palace technology in unexpected ways, and coordination with loyal guards. Every detail mattered, every misstep could be fatal. But for the first time, Leora felt that she was not facing the danger alone. The days leading up to the summit were filled with preparation. Eric trained Leora in new strategies, combining human improvisation with her royal skills. They reviewed every possible threat, planned contingencies, and rehearsed responses. The bond between them deepened, built on mutual respect and recognition of each other's abilities. Yet the conspirators were clever. They anticipated some moves, planting false information and attempting to mislead the palace staff. Arik, however, had anticipated the anticipation. He used deception to turn the enemy's plans against them, creating confusion that only humans could exploit. By the night of the summit, both Arik and Leora were ready. The palace was secure, loyal forces were in place, and every move had been calculated to counter the conspirators' most dangerous strategies. When the summit began, tension was high. Delegates from dozens of species arrived, unaware of the hidden danger. Arik and Leora moved quietly among the crowd, observing behavior, noting suspicious patterns, and preparing to act. The conspirators struck as predicted, attempting to manipulate security and create chaos. But Arik was ready. Using subtle distractions, tactical misdirections, and coordinated movements with palace guards, he turned the attack into a trap for the attackers themselves. Leora, fighting alongside him, was a force to be reckoned with. Her skill, combined with Arik's ingenuity, made them an unstoppable team. The conspirators were captured, their plans exposed, and their reputations ruined. For the first time, the power of human strategy and adaptability was undeniable. After the summit, the atmosphere in the palace shifted. Staff and advisors who had doubted Arik now regarded him with caution and respect. Leora, once fiercely independent, acknowledged the value of partnership, realizing that humans, so often dismissed by the galaxy, could provide guidance, insight, and protection that even the most advanced aliens could not match. Arik, standing beside her on the palace balcony, gazed at the stars. He felt the satisfaction of a mission well executed, but he also knew the challenges were far from over. The Council, still mocking humans from afar, had yet to see the full measure of their capability. Leora placed a hand on his shoulder. "You've changed the way I see humans," she said softly. Arik smiled. "And you've changed the way I see what it means to fight for something bigger than myself." Above them, the stars shone brighter than ever, a silent witness to a human and a princess who had begun to reshape the galaxy in ways no one had imagined. The conspiracy had been uncovered, but the larger battle, the one against prejudice, underestimation, and the arrogance of the Council, was only beginning. And humans, as the galaxy would soon learn, were not so easily defeated. The victory at the Council summit had been decisive, yet it was only a temporary respite. Azurath's palace buzzed with activity, repairing minor damages and reinforcing defenses. The conspirators had been captured, but their influence still lingered like a shadow over the city. For Arik Kane, the human guardian, there was no time to rest. The Council had heard rumors of his success and, as expected, dismissed them. "A human?" they had scoffed. "Impossible. He may have survived by luck, but it will not last. Royal blood cannot be safeguarded by a human species." Arik, standing on the palace balcony overlooking the city, heard these whispers through intercepted communications. He smiled faintly. Let them underestimate him. Humans thrived in such conditions. Princess Leora was different now. Her respect for Arik had grown, yet she remained cautious. Being royal meant never fully trusting anyone, and she had learned from years of rejection that appearances could be deceiving. Still, she had begun to see the value in Arik's methods. "You think they'll attack again?" she asked one morning, her voice steady but edged with concern. "They always do," Arik replied. "When someone looks vulnerable, enemies strike. That's predictable. What they won't expect is how we respond." It was true. The conspirators had underestimated them once. This time, Arik planned to turn the expectation of weakness into a trap. Intelligence reports confirmed his suspicions. A larger coalition of alien factions, allied secretly with rogue council members, was planning an invasion of Azurath. Their aim was simple: capture the princess, destabilize the planet, and demonstrate that humans were unfit as guardians. Leora studied the holographic maps with him. "They're well prepared," she said. "They have advanced weapons, ships, and trained soldiers. They think victory is guaranteed." "Then we make sure it isn't," Arik said. "Victory is not guaranteed for anyone when humans are involved." Together, they crafted a plan that combined Azurathian technology with Arik's human improvisation. He analyzed the enemy's strategies, predicted their moves, and found weaknesses that even the aliens themselves overlooked. Leora, following his lead, coordinated palace defenses, ensuring that every section of the city was ready. It was a delicate balance: overcommit and risk defeat, undercommit and risk capture. Yet Arik thrived in this uncertainty. The first signs of attack appeared in the early hours of dawn. Alien ships descended from the skies, casting shadows over the crystal towers of the capital. Panic rippled through the city as automated defense systems activated. Leora and Arik stood together in the central command room, eyes fixed on the holographic displays. "They expect us to respond conventionally," Arik said, voice calm. "But we won't. We'll split our forces, mislead them, and use their assumptions against them." Leora nodded. "And what about the civilians?" "They'll be safe," Arik replied. "That's human priority. Protecting lives is more important than proving strength." It was a lesson in morality as well as strategy, one the aliens rarely considered. The battle began. Alien ships fired energy beams, targeting palace defenses, while small squads of mercenaries attempted to infiltrate key points. The council expected the human to fail, to panic, and to create chaos, but Arik remained composed. He used unexpected tactics, redirecting energy beams with reflective surfaces, luring mercenaries into traps, and improvising barricades from palace equipment. Leora, coordinating her guards, executed flanking maneuvers Arik suggested, turning the enemy's strength against them. The aliens were confused. Every move they made was anticipated, yet their predictions failed. The humans' adaptability created chaos in their ranks. They expected weakness. They found ingenuity. In the palace, Leora witnessed a new side of Arik. He remained calm under fire, encouraged his allies, and never lost sight of the bigger picture. Unlike many alien commanders who relied on advanced technology and rigid protocols, Arik adapted to every situation. When one defense system failed, he repurposed another. When a mercenary squad bypassed an obstacle, he set another trap. By mid-battle, the tide had shifted. Alien forces, confident in their superiority, began to retreat, confused and disorganized. The human and the princess had turned the fight into a strategic victory, using intelligence, foresight, and creativity instead of sheer power. After the battle, the palace was quiet again, but the atmosphere had changed. Leora turned to Arik, her eyes filled with newfound understanding. "You were incredible," she said softly. "I've never seen anyone think like that, not even my father's best advisors." Arik smiled. "Humans aren't as simple as the galaxy thinks. We survive by learning, adapting, and never giving up. That's our strength." She nodded, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. They were no longer just guardian and ward, they were partners, equals in the defense of Azurath. The council, meanwhile, was forced to reassess. Reports of the failed invasion reached their chambers, and for the first time, some members could not hide their surprise. A human, working with a royal, had outmaneuvered forces they believed unbeatable. Whispers spread among the council. Maybe humans were not as weak as believed. Maybe their resilience and ingenuity were qualities worth recognizing. Arik, of course, paid them no attention. Recognition from the council was irrelevant. What mattered was the lives protected, the city saved, and the princess's trust earned. The victory also revealed cracks in the conspirators' alliances. Some had been secretly loyal to Azurath, quietly aiding Arik and Leora. Others, realizing their plans had failed, fled, or surrendered. Information gathered during the battle allowed the palace to secure borders, reinforce defenses, and uncover hidden traitors. For Leora, it was a lesson in leadership. She had always relied on strength and royal authority, but now she saw the importance of collaboration, trust, and insight. Arik's humanity had taught her that power was not just about superiority. It was about adaptability, compassion, and courage. That evening, as the sun set over Azurath, Arik and Leora stood on the palace balcony once more. The city shimmered below them, repaired and secure. Stars dotted the sky, silent witnesses to the humans' achievements. "You've changed everything," Leora said quietly. "Not just the palace, not just me, but the way people see humans. Even the council, they'll have to rethink their ideas." Arik shook his head. "It doesn't matter what they think. What matters is what we do. Humans will always find a way when they refuse to give up." She smiled faintly, a rare moment of softness. "I'm beginning to see that. Perhaps humans are stronger than I imagined." Arik grinned. "Stronger than anyone imagines." But even as they celebrated, Arik knew the battle was far from over. The council's laughter might have been silenced for now, but arrogance ran deep. There would be new plots, new threats, and new tests of humanity's resilience. And humans, he knew, would be ready. The palace, once a place of shadows and secrets, had become a proving ground. The princess and her human guardian had survived an invasion that the galaxy expected to succeed. They had demonstrated the power of intelligence, creativity, and courage. Above them, stars sparkled silently. The galaxy was watching. And soon it would learn that humans were not to be mocked. For Eric Kane and Princess Leora, the journey was just beginning. Together, they would face the challenges ahead, proving that even in a galaxy of advanced civilizations, human strength, the strength of spirit, ingenuity, and determination, was a force no one could ignore. The Council had underestimated humanity. And that, Eric knew, was the greatest advantage of all. The city of Azurath had survived. Its crystal towers gleamed under the twin suns, and the streets hummed with life. The mercenaries were defeated, the conspirators captured, and the palace secured. Yet the events of the past weeks had changed everything. For Eric Kane, the human guardian, the task had never been just about protection. It had become a test, not only of skill and strategy, but of what humans could truly accomplish in a galaxy that dismissed them as weak. And now the final challenge awaited, the Galactic Council itself. The Council had convened a special session, summoned to witness the aftermath of the failed conspiracy and invasion. Their chambers were vast, filled with representatives of dozens of alien species, each seated in towering, ornate chairs. Their eyes, sharp and intelligent, scanned reports and data with practiced judgment. Yet, despite the evidence before them, whispers of doubt lingered. How could a human, barely able to command respect among alien species, have guided a princess to victory against such overwhelming odds? Eric entered the chamber alongside Princess Leora, who moved with the confidence of a ruler who had reclaimed her place in the galaxy. She had changed. The rejection she had endured as a child had shaped her into a leader who combined wisdom, courage, and determination. And beside her stood the human who had defied every expectation, whose ingenuity had turned defeat into victory. The session began with a formal address. Alien representatives spoke, some politely praising Leora's actions, others cautious, hesitant to acknowledge the human beside her. "Princess Leora," one elder voice began, "you have survived what many would consider impossible. Your safety and the stability of Azurath have been secured. Yet the question remains, how?" Leora turned to Eric. "The answer," she said, voice steady, "is not only skill or training. It is the courage to act when others hesitate, the ability to think beyond expectations, and the willingness to trust those who are often overlooked. My guardian, Captain Eric Kane, is human, and humans are stronger than you believe." A ripple of surprise ran through the chamber. Some representatives gasped, others whispered, and a few stared in disbelief. Humans had long been mocked as weak, insignificant. Now, standing before them was living proof that they were not. Eric stepped forward, calm but resolute. "I am only human," he said, "but humans survive, we adapt. We create solutions when others see only obstacles. We protect what matters not because it is easy, but because it is right." There was silence. Even the most arrogant members of the council could not deny the truth in his words. The session continued, with evidence presented from the recent attacks, the conspiracies uncovered, and the strategies used to defend the palace. Holographic displays illustrated Eric's tactics, traps, misdirections, and unconventional methods that had confounded the invaders. Council members murmured among themselves. Some tried to dismiss the events as luck, coincidence, or the result of superior technology. But the patterns were undeniable. Every victory had involved human foresight, improvisation, and courage. Leora spoke again. "The galaxy has underestimated humans for too long. My guardian's actions prove that our species is capable of intelligence, strategy, and bravery that surpasses expectation. It is time to recognize that humans are not to be mocked or ignored." A silence fell over the chamber. Eyes that once regarded Eric with derision now regarded him with curiosity. Some representatives were cautious, unsure how to respond. Others, seeing the undeniable proof, began to nod in acknowledgement. Outside the chamber, news of the session spread quickly. Across star systems, reports described the events on Azurath. A human had protected a royal princess, uncovered conspiracies, and thwarted invasions that were thought unstoppable. Humans were no longer seen as weak. They were recognized as clever, resilient, and courageous. On the palace balcony, Eric and Leora watched the sun rise over the city, its twin beams reflecting off the crystal towers. The victories had not only secured Azurath, but had begun to change the galaxy's perception of humanity. "You did it," Leora said softly, her voice carrying pride. "You proved them wrong." Eric shook his head. "We did it. Alone, neither of us could have succeeded. Together, we showed what humans and partnership can accomplish." She smiled, a rare and genuine expression. "Then let the galaxy see it. Let them learn that strength is more than technology or alien perfection. It is courage, creativity, and determination." The council reconvened in the following weeks. Their tone had changed. Where once there had been mockery and doubt, now there was cautious respect. Humans were no longer considered inferior. They were seen as unpredictable, adaptable, and capable of great achievement. Some representatives extended formal invitations to Eric, asking him to share insights into human strategy, leadership, and resilience. Others approached Leora, seeking her guidance and partnership in future galactic endeavors. Eric, ever humble, accepted only what he needed to continue protecting Leora and ensuring the safety of Azurath. But the message was clear. The era of underestimating humans was over. The palace itself had changed. Guards who once doubted him now followed his orders with confidence. Staff who had whispered behind his back now sought his advice. Leora, once a princess rejected and isolated, now stood as a leader whose voice carried weight across the galaxy. Together, they had not only survived, but reshaped the power dynamics of Azurath and beyond. In quiet moments, Eric reflected on the journey. He had begun as a human mocked by the galaxy, assigned to care for someone who doubted him. He had faced danger, conspiracies, and political machinations. He had adapted, survived, and thrived. Now he stood at the edge of a new era, one in which humans were no longer insignificant. The most striking change, however, was in Leora. She had always been strong, but the experiences of the past weeks had tempered her wisdom and broadened her vision. She understood leadership was not just about authority or skill. It was about courage, collaboration, and insight. "You've changed the way I see everything," she told Eric one evening as they overlooked the palace gardens. "Not just humans, not just strategy, but what it means to fight for what is right." Eric smiled. "And you've shown me that leadership isn't just about power. It's about responsibility, courage, and vision. Together, we've proven that the galaxy's assumptions can be wrong." Leora laughed softly. "Yes, the galaxy won't forget that anytime soon." Months passed, and Azurath flourished. Trade resumed, diplomacy stabilized, and the city became a hub of knowledge and innovation. Humans were no longer mocked. They were studied, respected, and occasionally feared for their ingenuity. Eric remained by Leora's side, not as a servant or subordinate, but as a partner, advisor, and friend. Together, they trained new leaders, developed strategies to defend against emerging threats, and prepared for the next challenge the galaxy might bring. The Galactic Council, once dismissive, began to reconsider their assumptions about every underestimated species. And across star systems, whispers spread: humans are not weak. Humans endure. Humans adapt. Humans can lead. The defining moment came when the Council formally invited Eric to their chambers, not as a subject of ridicule, but as a human ambassador. His presence was met with awe, curiosity, and cautious respect. The very species once laughed at was now recognized as a contributor to galactic stability and leadership. Standing in the chamber, Eric reflected on how far humans had come. From the outer sectors to the halls of the most powerful council in the galaxy, his journey had shown one truth: strength is measured not by species, but by spirit, courage, and ingenuity. Leora stood beside him, her hand briefly brushing his shoulder. "You've done more than survive," she said softly. "You've changed the galaxy." Eric nodded. "Humans always do more than anyone expects. We survive, adapt, and rise when needed. That is who we are." As the sun set over Azurath, casting golden light across the crystal towers, the city and the galaxy alike entered a new era. The princess, once rejected and underestimated, now stood tall as a wise leader. The human, once mocked and dismissed, now earned respect, admiration, and influence far beyond his origin. Together, they had not only defended a planet. They had reshaped perceptions, challenged arrogance, and proven that humans, no matter how underestimated, were forces to be reckoned with. And so, in the vast, star-studded galaxy, the story of a human guardian and a royal princess became legend. The Galactic Council, the conspirators, and every observer learned the same lesson: underestimate humans at your own risk. The stars themselves seemed to shine a little brighter that night, as if acknowledging the truth. Humans endure, humans rise, and humans can inspire a galaxy. The journey was over, but the era of humanity had only just begun.